Hi, everyone. Let us know if you can hear us. We are excited to be kicking off our Friday night community spotlight today with Sean Coster. Sean, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks,
Chris
Trey.
is going to give you a little bit of background, but welcome to the Endurance School.
Thanks
Yeah,
for having me.
hello everyone. Sean, thank you so much for coming and joining us.
Absolutely. That
Um,
makes
Sean is an elite runner and a run coach who has been in the running endurance world for his entire life. Ran at Colorado State University for his college years. He averred earlier that he was not a very good track runner and has only run a 14:55K and a 31-minute 10K, which, yeah, those of us in triathlon world are like, whoa. Um, a all conference cross country runner while in college, and then went to get an exercise physiology degree at Humboldt State, where he did that graduate work. Came to Portland, where he helped run some of the run programs over at Nike World headquarters for quite a long time. That's where he and I kind of bumped into each other for the first time. And also founded the Run Portland Running Club here in Portland, Oregon. And as a little side note, Sean is also my realtor, and he helped my wife and I purchase the house that we are broadcasting to you all from. So, Sean, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for everything you've done in helping us, get domiciled. And I'm really excited to ask you some questions about Runform this evening.
All right. I'm excited to be here. I'm doing my best. So,
So I'm gonna leap right into the run form discussion because I was actually having a long conversation with one of my athletes earlier today about the whole forefront, midfoot, heel strike kind of debate that sort of rages out there in the running community. Um, and and I was wondering what guidance, what advice would you have for people that are trying to change where their foot lands on the ground?
yeah, I think it's a good question. I think this is the thing you need to think about when you start to make a conscious attempt at changing your running form. Like I think it's well intentioned, but I think you need to make it something that's natural and sustainable. And so it's kind of like a lot of things in life. It's like a little goes a long way, right? So, and that's probably the perfect example, Chris, is like when people feel like they perceive themselves as a heavy heel striker and they know enough based on their coaches or whatever that perhaps that's causing a braking motion to their stride that they should change it. But to do some drills that manipulate things in an artificial way that can't be sustained isn't sustainable. And so making small changes is the important thing. So everyone wants a silver bullet, but like with any of this stuff, it's going to be like kind of a long, slow haul to doing things differently.
Where do you start with a runner that comes to you and maybe doesn't even know what they're doing wrong? Like, how do you assess somebody's run form in the first place?
So how do we kind of analyze it in the first place? You're
Yeah, how do you assess somebody when they come to you and they think they're doing something inefficiently,
Yeah,
and how do you, yeah.
sorry. I think you got to kind of start simple. I think it does take a second party to do it. Having a ability to analyze the cadence and strides per minute is a decent way to start.
Mhm.
And there's no magic number, but I'm getting the impression that your group is probably pretty well versed in understanding that like per foot's 90 steps per minute is pretty optimal. And most people are kind of under that, so that's a
Mhm.
good way to go. It's probably not worth it, but people that have the ability to actually measure their ground contact time, and since it's like a fraction of a second, that takes mechanical products like force place meters and stuff like that. So that'd be the next step. But yeah, that would be the biggest thing is looking, what's your cadence like? Because essentially, if you're having long, slow strides that, although they cover a lot of ground, cause you to spend a lot of time on the ground and inherently break you while you're at some point of your stride, that's, you know, inefficient by definition, and that could be changed.
In terms of that ground contact time, is there a range that and these things are all, we get these questions all the time. But how
Right.
many steps should I take per minute? How many revolutions per minute on the bike?
Right.
In terms of that ground contact time, can you give us a sense of what the range might be, and what the units are that you're measuring it
Well, so ground contact time is, how long in terms of seconds you're spending on the time with your foot on the ground in total. Okay. And so, but yeah, I'm not even going to tell a triathlon group a number because I know they'll like nerd out and try and measure it, but it's so small you can't measure it.
Hmm.
And, but the cadence you can. And
in?
so, in terms of steps per minute, like each foot, 90 steps per minute is roughly an optimal amount of time.
Mhm.
So that's 90 or 180 total, excuse me. Um, and you can actually count that, but again, I come back to the fact that, like, if you're on a run, and we would do this with, newer runners or people that were asking these questions to try and analyze their form. um, if you spend 30 seconds counting, right foot and left foot hits, and you get to your 90 in total, you may have done something very artificial with your stride,
Mhm.
and so, although that can be eye-opening to show you, wow, how high is that cadence that's efficient and ideal versus what I'm doing, it doesn't really actually help you train it up, if that makes sense. Okay. Uh, so, and we can talk more about this, but my feeling is that, we've, if you're just to take runners as a spectrum, and, on one side you have the most enduring runners that can go, for hundreds of miles in rare cases, and then you have people that run really fast for a short period of time. These people on the other side of the spectrum, sprinters, are the ones that can kind of show us what the most optimal form is for obvious reasons, right? And so it's something with a low ground contact time that generates a lot of power. Okay. And we can, as endurance athletes, scale that to what's appropriate for us that's similar, but not exactly the same. Does that make sense? So
Hmm.
you don't have to create as much force into the ground, but you still need a low ground contact time. And so when we look at the world's best runners, biomechanists realize that they all have these characteristics in common, which is a really brief ground contact time, this huge float phase. And so the big irony is that I think most people think to run fast, you need to cover a lot of ground quickly, which you do, but you don't do that with horizontal force.
Hmm.
Mhm.
You do that actually with vertical force and
Mhm.
the bound in between.
Hmm.
Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, a perfect forum for this would be to have some visuals, but I always use the analogy that it's like a gazelle or a deer when they take off. When they walk, they're inefficient, but when they get going, they have this smack to the ground and bound forward, and cover a lot of ground. And
Hmm.
that's what elite runners do, even distance runners. So,
So I know you've worked with runners of all abilities and who've been around running for various lengths of time. One of the things that I love about running is that the barrier to entry is so low. Like with a good pair of running shoes, anyone can start running. But I think that we lose a lot of runners because it's also really hard, and it's a hard thing to like get started with.
it is.
Do you have any advice for our newer runners or people who are sort of just starting to like get into the sport and see some progress, about how to make it enjoyable and stay with it?
Just in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I actually think that, well, yeah, there's lots of thoughts I have. I mean, one is effort-based training. You
Mm-hmm.
know, the watch is really valuable, but I think, even at my point in life now, I don't really care how far I've run, but I measure my time.
Mm-hmm.
I do hours per week for running, and I know relative intensities, and I know that I'm going to achieve fitness goals, by those, and fine tune from there. And so I think beginning runners should really be, um, like, released from any kind of burden of performance early on, with the idea of, um, Okay, maybe my goal is to run for 3 minutes and walk a minute, run for 3 minutes, walk a minute, and do that for 20 or 30 minutes, right?
Awesome.
And my running effort could be something between conversational and moderate, as
Mm-hmm.
established with my coach, right? And then I want to challenge myself and work hard, and I'm going to do some strides, at the track that are 100 meters long, and they're fast and smooth, but they're not, wildly out of control and a maximum effort or something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
so, we love to see performances and absolute things, but I think if we can just give ourselves the ability to think about how we're feeling while we're doing it
Mm-hmm.
and regulate that way, that's much more sustainable for people at every level of running.
Yeah,
So, especially
absolutely.
beginners.
Yeah, thank you.
And so, like, going from those beginners, like getting them to tune in to how they're feeling on the run. Once those beginners are keying into the idea of run technique and form, and you talk to them, okay, we're aiming for around 90 strides per minute, give or take a few. Um, how do you begin to adjust that runner's cadence and their economy?
I think, yeah, even the cadence thing is like a conversation to understand the theory that, is like, we're not trying to eat up a bunch of ground, we're actually trying to be efficient and strong over the
Mhm.
ground. And then I really do think that you can call them running form drills, or perhaps a better word or term would be to call it like running specific strength training is really an
Hmm.
appropriate thing to start. And it makes sense from the perspective of injury prevention, which I think we know is like a real challenge with runners at all levels early on, right? But then it does help them with their efficiency, economy. I know we're going to talk about that. And so, specifically, I mean, things you can do. I'm a big advocate as I'm 45, so as we get older, it's like some of the things we took for granted as kids are more challenging. And sadly, jumping, hopping on one foot, skipping, things like that, which sound extremely basic, are sometimes shockingly difficult, even for people that are decent athletes in other ways, right? But that kind of athleticism is really important to maintain and is a very natural way to develop um, a good economy with
Mhm.
running.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I'm a big fan of like just make it happen naturally by doing things that are sustainable, because otherwise, if you do some sort of artificial drill for 30 meters, you can't go turn that into your running form for a half marathon in a
Mhm.
half Ironman, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but doing a stride uphill will uncover a lot of gaps in your form and at the same time get you stronger, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. So will
Sure.
bounding and skipping and things like that. So,
What are some of those gaps that you just mentioned? Like, when you're like, what are some of the faults that you might spot in someone who's new to running, or long time in running, that has
yeah,
been
yeah. And it
addressing
is
things?
summer. I think the biggest thing is what I'm trying to kind of allude to is I think the number one thing that most runners honestly do, even pretty decent runners, is that they overstride
Mhm.
functionally. And so, the measurement of that and like kind of getting qualitative is a little difficult if you don't have a biomechanics lab.
Mhm.
But just practically, it's like if you're spending too much time on the ground, you're by default overstriding,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
and so if you do things that require you to get off the ground quickly, develop your neuromuscular ability to, bounce off the ground, so to speak, and the strength to support that, then you're going to become more efficient. So it's actually very simple. And one of the real pleasant things is that if you get a basic program that does develop neuromuscular efficiency and improvement, the changes happen really quickly, unlike a lot of things, so it has a pretty quick feedback loop. And then after that, I would say just general posture, where
Mhm.
people are, you know, people don't know what to do with their arms, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Functionally. And it's really like, if you don't have, and I know the core term gets kind of overused, but I think that lower core, if your whole, you know, trunk isn't coordinated in its movements, your right shoulder and your left hip have, a synchronicity that they need to have during every float phase when the, right foot's on the ground or something like that. coming off the ground. Those are the kind of things. And so when you see people running with their arms at their sides or hunched over, their chest is slumped, those types of pretty obvious things that coaches are able to point out just by watching them from a profile.
T-Rex arms.
Yeah, exactly. Our arms are pretty active, or at least our upper trunk's pretty active in the running motion.
Yep. We have a question from chat about how cadence changes going downhill. Do you advocate for a faster cadence when you're descending?
I think with descending, the number one thing is I feel like, as coaches, we probably all just want to keep our athletes healthy, right? Mm-hmm. So, just with running stride in general, just to be as natural as possible. So to relax and try and not manipulate anything. So yeah, keep your cadence high. But, you really need to lean forward, and so, as a trail runner, I mean, there's some costs involved if that goes wrong, right? So I think tempering your speed in general can sometimes be wise because there's not a lot to gain with that. But yeah, roughly it should be the same cadence.
You had mentioned a few minutes ago a program that addresses neuromuscular efficiency. Would you tell us a little bit about what that means and maybe what some of those movements are specifically that you would have somebody do that aren't necessarily drills, but you're like, oh, okay, I want to improve this athlete's neuromuscular efficiency. What are some of the things that you would have that, so imagine you're in like a one-to-one like coaching scenario and you're like, oh, okay, we're going to do this set of exercises. What are some of the movements that you would take that athlete to?
I think with like a one-on-one thing, even with people that are decent runners, I think one good exercise is, ideally we'd all be at the track to be able to do this stuff. But if you're just standing on the line, on a track to start a run with your feet together, and then you just lean forward until you get to that point where you feel like you're going to fall, you engage this like slip stumble reflex. And so your leg, one of them will go into flexion and it will, brace you. It's going to keep you from falling. And that's running, right? And so when you feel that, then you're in a posture that is very natural to go and run. And as absolutely simple as that sounds, that can be kind of profound. Mm-hmm. And we'll have people start by doing strides with that as opposed to trying to just like hammer, right? So then taking it from there, I mean, I think that, skipping rope can be a great exercise. It can be pretty mild because you've got two legs hitting the ground and you're not getting so much stretch to one leg that you could cause overuse injuries. And then as people feel more confident with that, single leg hops, or skips, if you will, can be kind of challenging and it can be really eye-opening in terms of, when you go to bound forward, say you take your right leg and you're going to go do 10 hops, down a safe surface, people really find out like your ground contact time has to be quick with that to keep yourself from falling over, right? And so you also have to generate enough power to get your leg back through in time to brace you. And so that's like one of the most simple exercises that goes so far. And it's running specific strength training, it just is. I would say after that, I like using the uphill for various things. If people can do a bound correctly, then uphill bounds are fantastic. You get a big stretch, for the lower leg, gastroc and soleus in particular. So people with like Achilles tendonitis, that can be tough for. But then you develop real power for running that translates into flat running, strength and speed. And then honestly, just doing strides, like helping athletes to learn how to do a stride, something that's fast and smooth where they can run at, an intensity that's over 100% of VO2 max, which for a lot of endurance runners, they're not tapping into very much, is like kind of the best strength training. And you do that uphill, it's even better. So.
Great.
For those of us that don't really know exactly what a stride is, I fall into this all the time. Molly and I have a workout in our workout library that's like endurance miles plus strides, and I can't tell you the number of athletes that are like, "Excuse me,
what's a stride?
What in the world does this mean?" For those of us that what is if you were telling somebody how to execute a stride? What would you tell them to do?
Okay. Yeah, I think the number one thing is it again, it has to be natural, which I think people are going to be like, probably dismiss it. But like if you go and if you feel tension from head to toe in what you're trying to do, you're probably doing it wrong. But I think that for people just starting to do strides, that haven't run at that intensity level
Mhm.
with any frequency, that's natural. So stick with it, do it for a short period of time. But a stride it's a fast run that is with kind of perfect form and maximum relaxation. So again, it takes probably a lot of cognitive focus for people that are new to it to be relaxed, but it's possible to do. And it inherently kind of creates a threshold where when you start to be bearing down and you're trying to sprint and flinging your body forward, you're not striding, right?
Mhm.
You're like running for your life, is what we call it. Like top speed running, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Mhm.
So and I think that endurance athletes need to realize that they're most likely going to be very poor at doing that well because they do it so infrequently.
Mhm.
Okay, so to kind of be kind to themselves and build up, but um, yeah, it's running specific strength training, but it's a fast and smooth run that's like 90% of top speed, which means like if someone was chasing you, and your life depended on it, that's top speed,
Yeah.
which is usually a little faster than people think, but smooth.
Mhm.
And how long is each stride? Like how long does it go on for?
Yeah, I mean, it's highly variable. So, you've got the NFL combine and they want to know what people can run a 40 for. That's top speed. All
Mhm.
right. But for some newer runners, some beginning runners, that might be an appropriate length for a stride, which is a lower intensity for them. But it might be the maximum they can keep their posture and everything relaxed and fast. I think 100 meters to 150 meters for most people is probably kind of the wheelhouse because cardiovascular effects really don't take account to the extent that you're not slowing down because your breathing is too high.
Mhm.
It's still a muscular activity. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Or a
Yeah, totally.
neuromuscular activity. And that's really what we're trying to challenge. And so then I think the other question that should be asked is, well, how much rest do you need between bouts? And it's kind of like heavier strength training, which endurance athletes probably aren't doing, but this is their most specific sport, high intensity strength thing. So it should be at least twice as much as the time run. So if you run 100 meters in 30 seconds, then you should take 45 seconds or a minute, jogging or walking and do the next one.
Nice.
Because, and this is the thing that you've probably experienced as coaches is that it's the most foreign because someone feels like, well, I can pretty much do that intensity, but I don't need that much rest and I can bang them all out and I'm done,
Right.
right? Well, what we're trying to get is real quality that is different. And so if you frame it, I think as this is my strength training and this isn't mileage, then I think people might buy in more to getting the quality out of it.
Makes sense. We have another question out of chat. Is it possible in this focus on increasing cadence to develop a cadence that is too high? Can you overshoot that
Yeah,
and be
I think so. I mean, if you're not being natural with your stride, and you're just trying to hit the ground a lot of times, I mean, what's going to be sacrificed then is the amount of power that comes out of it. It just means that you're really not going to go anywhere, and so you're going to look like from the profile of someone that is really literally spinning their wheels. So that's where when I was coaching people with this, I would encourage them on typical endurance run, recovery run, to check in a few times for 30-second bouts and get an idea of what their cadence was. And, if it was like in the low 80s, then to make a conscious effort, maybe for another minute to pick it up and think about how that feels, right? And then try and integrate that. And so, that would be a good way of ensuring that you're not, if you're at 100 steps per minute per foot, then you're probably inefficient in another way.
I alerted you beforehand that I wanted to ask about this, and you just said the efficient word again. And this is an honest question because I can't ever keep these straight myself, and maybe it's not possible to keep straight. But I would love to know the difference between running efficiency and running economy.
Yeah, I mean, I think running efficiency is just a general term people use, and there may be physiologists that have an opinion on a definition. But what I always felt was a textbook definition of running economy was going to be something that was absolute, that would typically be a running speed that was correlated to a oxygen consumption. And so it's like real wonky kind of science stuff, but it allows people to measure, you know, for instance, when people talk about max VO2, and I imagine the audience, reads stuff like this. So, Frank Shorter won a gold medal with a max VO2 of 70. Yet, they say most elite athletes, world-class athletes, have endurance athletes have VO2 maxes that are going to be between 80 and 90, right? So, he was much more economic, and meaning that when he was at 5-minute pace, which was his marathon pace, his oxygen consumption was lower than his competitor. He was more economic in that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So usually you'd have to have oxygen consumption and running speed go along with it. And then to me, efficiency is just you're more efficient, meaning you expend less energy and you go faster. Just general. So. And obviously I use them interchangeably. So like most people do, except for like actual physiologists that are doing testing.
Got it.
So you have not just been confined to the track, though. You've done some ultra running as well, right? You were saying you've done some running in the mountains?
Yeah, I've done a few. I enjoy that the most, but yeah, last 5 or 6 years.
What would you say you were surprised by the most as you made the shift from running as a someone who was developing their run to getting into trail running and ultra running?
I think the biggest thing is just, obviously pace is completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
and really the reliance on monitoring through effort. And it's kind of an MO with me with coaching, is because I feel like people need to focus first on what is my effort, and if you're asking someone to wear a heart rate monitor and stay between 140 and 147 beats per minute on this run, I feel like if things work well, they should know where they're at without having to look at their watch, and that can just be confirmation of it. And with trail running, I feel like it's all that much more important because chucking at 50K, I made some mistakes with that, and I was racing that, and there was so much climbing involved, and I didn't take enough nutrition, but I just felt that, well, I know the distance. I've run 30 miles multiple times. Well, not all 30 miles are built the same, right?
Right.
So if you do a lot of climbing, sometimes you can have a nutrition requirement that's double per distance what you would have otherwise. And I think the same thing applies to just your running pace and everything. So yeah, that effort-based training, I think, pays off more and more with trail running.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you won't get any complaints with us on that front.
No.
I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but
yeah, I'm happy to have people forget about pace entirely.
I mean, I wonder if this is something that you experienced as a coach. I know that as Molly and I have coached more and more, we find ourselves drifting more towards being guided by effort rather than all of the metrics and whatnot. Was that your experience?
Yeah, by the end of full-time coaching, that was really what I felt like I wanted people to learn, because I felt like that was something that was sustainable to the rest of their running career. And it's kind of like the masters do it anyway. You find good elite athletes, and I mean, it's uncanny. If you put a heart rate monitor on them and you have them run on a flat surface or a treadmill, and you ask them what they think their heart rate is. If they have any experience with that, they know what their effort is, and they can probably guess with 5 beats. You know what I mean? So there's so many upsides to that. When you're overtrained or getting sick because you know yourself and you get feedback that shows you things are not right. And then I think too, there's a psychological component when you're just chasing everything all the time. We're assuming these are competitive athletes that want to achieve a performance. If every day is it's not necessarily a race, but you're just trying to wring the most you have out of yourself, it's not sustainable. You know what I mean? Stress and rest. And so people need to learn how to actively recover. And I think that effort-based training helps them.
Mm-hmm. So for a lot of triathletes, I know when I first started racing in this sport, I was told things like not to run more than 2 or 3 times a week. And I think run frequency actually has a much bigger impact on performance than a lot of triathletes are told, and then a lot of triathletes necessarily believe. Do you have any advice for time limited 3-sport athletes to kind of increase that frequency a bit? Or do you think it's important?
I think it's important.
Okay.
Yeah. I just am, I know my limitations in not being a multi-sport coach.
Mm-hmm.
I think it takes creativity, but I do think that, for framing this whole conversation and how do you become more efficient with your running, because of the obvious values for that,
Mm-hmm.
if you're competing, I think trying to get some running in most days benefits. And I think that I'm not sure what your experience is, but I meet a lot of people that are like, well, why would I lace up my shoes if I'm going to go for a 15-minute run? Because they're used to doing a 4-hour bike ride.
Right,
So,
right.
well, because of that, and I know enough maybe to be dangerous, but in talking to Amy, Chris, I know that right now, all these people, sadly, with swimming, can't get in the pool a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times. And that's really tough because it's such a neuromuscular activity and you really need frequency, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually think that running is a lot like that.
Mm-hmm.
I was lucky enough to get into it, as a teenager, which is sort of young in America, but like a lot of people might be coming into this as adults.
Mm-hmm.
And so a 15-minute run, Arthur Lydiard has, it was like a pioneer in saying, I mean, there's value in that,
Yeah.
and get out, do some running. I mean, it can be a warm up before your core routine. It could be framed as running specific strength training to
Mm-hmm.
warm up in these drills and stuff like that. So,
Chris and I are big fans of the sneaky short run off the bike.
oh, and that makes so much sense because it's probably a great way, I would assume, to recover after a long run.
Yeah,
Right? Just
absolutely.
yeah.
And train that first mile of getting out off of your bicycle.
Well, exactly, and there's probably some evidence to show that there real are tangible benefits to
Mm-hmm.
that because
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
know that when you have deeply fatigued fibers, from endurance fashion, you start to use the less efficient ones, and so if
Mm-hmm.
you can go run off of a long ride, I mean, you're probably creating a lot of strength there for running. So,
Yep, absolutely. Thank you.
One to continue the swim to run crossover. What Molly and I did a talk a few weeks ago just about basically about the history of the freestyle stroke, and then like the elements of a freestyle stroke. And I was wondering if you would kind of take us through, because we're
I'm talking about swimming, right?
no, we're talking
Okay.
talking about running.
Tell us about the freestyle stroke.
Tell us about freestyle, Sean. It's really easy for those of us that have been inside the world for a long time to start talking about, in the swimming world, like catch, pull, recovery, and people are like, what does that mean? But like when you see, what would you say are the elements of an efficient running, run form?
No, I think that's a good question, and I think it supports when people can visualize like a slow motion profile of a really efficient runner. I think it kind of can open their eyes to the fact that we're not just gobbling up ground.
Mm-hmm.
Like a classic cross country skier, is gobbling up ground horizontally, right, to be effective. And I feel like it's kind of ironic that really to run fast, what we're trying to do is create a lot of power at the instant before we hit the ground, not spend a lot of time on the ground and then float through the ground or across, the ground horizontally. So, you have the pre-contact phase where the foot's coming down and hasn't touched the ground yet. And as I said, the hamstrings and the glutes are ideally really active then, even with an endurance runner. Then you contact the ground briefly and quickly, and I always try and use the analogy of like a ball bouncing off the ground. You want to be firm and quick off the ground. And then that coordination of the whole body, transfers to getting that swing leg through and floating through the air. And I've always kind of liked the idea of like, grew up running trails and stuff and you scoop deer and they go run and you just, I mean, they're the best bounders, you know, and you think of that bound, it's like something to desire that an animal has. And so that's where you're spending most of your time, and that's how you're getting your horizontal motion. Okay. So that's the swing phase. And then it all happens again within the leg. So, and I think if people think of them as three distinct phases that have massively different amounts of time involved, then they realize the value in developing, you know, quick ground contact time and some power off the ground.
Is there one that is the most frequent like offender if somebody needs to change something? Like for us,
they overstride.
Yeah, overstriding. Got it.
And it's like the people with the best intentions. They're trying, you know, trying too hard to run fast will literally break you, because what you'll do is you'll swing your leg out forward to try and gobble that ground up. And that's where my kind of bad analogy with the cross-country skier is. And then, you know, you hit with your heel, which inherently is not evil. When people have like vilified heel striking, you know, but when your leg is way out in front of you, then you have to, you end up breaking yourself, and you have to overcome that inertia you've caused and then have to follow through. And, you know, you just end up becoming truly non-economical. I mean, it takes a lot of energy to then get yourself back to getting across that and getting your leg underneath you. So that's where the like simple thing I think came up years ago with like, oh, we need to increase our stride frequency because that'll solve everything. But that in and of itself doesn't mean you're actually getting any power off the ground. And so I think if we break the stride up into segments by doing some drills and then encouraging people just to run fast and relaxed more frequently, especially uphill, that'll help.
Great.
We've got another question from chat. What are your three favorite strength exercises? And I'm going to say your three favorite strength exercises in a running context.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're beyond general strength training stuff, I would say, so uphill bounds are excellent. And, you know, you can get something out of doing, you know, 10 or 15 on each leg and doing, you know, 4 to 6 reps of that uphill. And again, that sort of begs for video on how to do that, because it's, you know, it takes a little bit of technique, and I'm sorry, we don't have access to something like that. Single leg hop would be a way of calling, you know, like a single leg flat ground jump. That's an excellent one. And then I would say after that, I mean, again, I'm gonna put the stride in there, and the stride can be flat or uphill, because I would say that for endurance athletes, that's actually a strength exercise.
Briefly returning to the elements of a run form, what's happening with the upper body?
Well, I think that's going to be tougher to kind of explain without visuals, but you know, it has to work in counterbalance to the lower body, and it's hugely important. So I think people need to think of, you know, you got to keep your shoulders essentially over your hips. I mean, they can be slightly in front of them. You know, sticking your chest out, typically for most people, that's beneficial because of the way we work all the time, sort of slumped. But you know, I think of it as, and I would try and coach people when you have, you know, your left foot hit the ground, really that right shoulder and that right upper quadrant of the body really needs to be finding its way forward to counterbalance that movement, if that makes sense. And that's where I think we can go from breaking it down theoretically and making it really kind of clumsy to try and coordinate it, to just, we need to do the activity and learn how to become more efficient and coordinated, if that makes sense. And that's where like probably a dance teacher would be better at actually coaching our runners. You know what I mean? I don't know how you get it all together, but I think doing the drills and doing the strides help.
Yeah, it sounds like you know, go find an uphill area and do some strides going uphill, and you're saying that's really going to help kind of communicate what order things should kind of be happening.
I absolutely agree, because you're not going to get up that hill without using your arms. And you know, and if you do it and you find that you're using them in a really unnatural form, then you come back to, well, am I fast and relaxed? Is this sustainable? No. What do I go jog down the hill? What do I change to do that? And it can be demoralizing, because you might feel like you're not running uphill very fast. But again, if the effort is high then you're doing the work. Give yourself enough rest and, just do another route.
Mm-hmm. So VT would like to know what your personal pre-race rituals and warm-up routine are.
Oh gosh, probably normal stuff, like get my food in, my coffee.
What's your race breakfast?
I like a protein guy. Like I can do 2 eggs and maybe a bagel.
Whoa.
I got a pretty iron stomach. Yeah, 2 cups of coffee. So,
nice.
But I'll get up early enough. So, jog for 15 to 25 minutes, depending on the length of the race. For an ultra, I won't warm up.
Mm-hmm.
And then, unless it's, no, not an ultra, an uphill race, I would have to warm up for. And then do 4 to 6 strides with a lot of rest in between, and make sure I'm done with those, ideally 5 to 10 minutes before the race, but not more. And then just kind of, hanging out. Nice. So. And I'm a big fan of you want to be sweating when you go to the starting line.
Mm-hmm.
And that may not be really as appropriate for an Ironman, obviously, as it is for a half marathon or 10K. But, we need our legs warm and ready to go.
Yeah.
One thing that Molly and I always like to kick around is discussions about energy systems and training zones. And I think that a lot of triathletes end up we get very focused on the concepts of threshold heart rate and threshold pace. And I know that a lot of runners and run coaches end up more in sort of percentages of VO2 max. And even though you said that, that by the end of the time that you were coaching, you ended up more in effort-based training, I wonder if you would talk a little bit about the different training zones or ranges that you found useful and effective.
Sure. I think, that sort of begs the question what your event is, but I think since we have, endurance athletes, assuming even people are going to do something as short as a 10K, but if it's as part of a multi-sport, event, this is a long event. I think there sort of was always, from the running coaching background, you'd find a lot of people that really pushed lactate thresholds zone. And that really, at least, my definition, if we're staying on the same page with things, would be kind of your 1 hour race pace for a pretty fit person. For a more recreational novice person, that might be a 30-minute race pace because they don't have the endurance. So it's pretty hard, you know what I mean? And in a multi-sport event, you're probably not going to tap into that too much other than maybe in a portion of your run. But to answer your question, I thought the zone below it, which I call the aerobic threshold, which really physiologically would be more defined as when you start to convert from using primarily fats as your energy system to gaining more carbohydrates to have to fuel that. That system, I think the beauty of it, which for an elite athlete would be their marathon race pace, okay, or just a little bit slower than that, is something that you can tap into more frequently because it takes less time to recover and delivers these huge dividends physiologically for, I think, the group that we're talking about. You know what I'm saying? So to put it into a workout where, guys would say, well, I need to do a 4-mile tempo run. It's well, what if you ran 8 miles at 25 seconds slower per mile, and then 2 days later, you can still go do a long run,
And physiologically, are we sort of talking about that first lactate threshold, the lower
Correct.
one?
That's the other. Okay. Yeah, and then since everyone has their own vernacular, I don't know, but yeah, it's I always called it aerobic threshold or the first threshold.
Yeah.
So, and if you did it with blood lactate, it's the 2 millimole one, which isn't 2 millimoles for everyone, but it's that first one. Yeah.
For all of Molly and mine athletes out there, we did not pay Sean to just go through that.
They validated that.
We spend a lot of time trying to talk to our athletes about the power of aerobic development and just how much it makes you faster. That it's not. I think something that a lot of athletes bump into is they think that the training. The most effective training looks exactly like the race. And
Yeah.
so you end up with athletes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the art of training as an endurance athlete, which is like almost counterintuitive to anything. But any kind of big project you have in life, you break it up into pieces, and seldom do you just do the whole thing. You know, like music's like that or whatever, right? And I think that that's the way it is with endurance training. And it's like there's kind of a magic to it all coming together on race day because
Mm-hmm.
you know, the marathon being the kind of most explicit example, I think, is like you've never spent 26.2 miles running at that pace and you're
Right.
expected to do it. And it happens for, you know, millions of people a year. So
Mm-hmm.
it's cool. So you got to have some faith in it, right? And we always called it training from under, like underneath, you know, like
Yeah.
training from below, you know, and so it doesn't feel as gratifying as sexy as just
Running
being dog
fast.
tired,
Right.
but it's more sustainable.
What is your favorite cross training? Like personal favorite? What do you like to do?
Um, not a big cross trainer.
Running.
Uh,
Running is your favorite
yeah, I'm the
cross
worst person to ask. Mountain biking is enjoyable.
Okay. You think it's fine?
Yeah, I'm the worst. Like it's like raining outside right now. I'm like I might not run tomorrow. It's like, no, if I was, yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, I would live somewhere where I could cross country ski or backcountry ski.
Cool.
Be more into mountain running in the winter. You know, I'll try and get as much elevation as I can backcountry skiing, and then you know you ski down. And it's much quicker, and it's a lot like doing a longer run. So that would be my favorite.
Great.
Yeah.
I think we all have, like, all of us have like that, like a number of coaches in our background, or like sayings that we've picked up along the way, or ideas or concepts that have really stuck with us. What is something for you in your whole history of training and racing and coaching that you picked up from someone else, or just noticed along the way that is really important to you as a runner?
Oh man, that's tough. I don't know. I don't have anything profound. I think in college, you know, my freshman year at William & Mary, we had a really great coach, and he kind of met you where you were. And you know, as freshmen, you're dog meat, right? You're nobody, and he would give us the time of day. But like, he didn't expect it to happen all at once. And I think that really, that's where I got the idea of like, you got to train where you are right now, you know, and do what you're capable of right now, and just do it every day, you know, and have that belief that you're going to grow and get better, you know. And it's not sexy, it's not a, you know, any kind of catchphrase, but no matter where we are, you know, as adults with jobs and everything, it's like we got to still kind of meet ourselves where we're at, do the best we can, but you know, with that vision of like what our goals are and everything. So, you know, got to be real about it.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Favorite race? What's your favorite race? What's the number one?
I don't know. I like Amy and I had run the Dog Mountain. They used to have an uphill race,
Awesome.
or well, up and down. Excuse me. Then that's gone. I like the weird stuff now.
Brutal run.
So I was hoping to maybe go. There's a mountain running world championships that were going to be held in Europe, Austria this year, but I doubt they'll have them now. And so I thought that ran well enough at the U.S. Mountain Running Championships. I was going to do that, but you know, and this is trail stuff. Chucking Up 50K is just such a fantastic regional trail race up in Bellingham. Shows off some of the best trails we have in the region. And yeah, so maybe not your group stuff, but
I am gonna go look it up and sign up for it as soon as this call is over. So
March it'll be back. Yeah, they didn't have it this year. So.
Oh, nice, awesome.
And you know, the one nice thing is that a lot of our athletes are branching out and doing other stuff and doing, you know, that's one of the glories, like Molly said, one of the glories of running is the barrier to entry is low. And we have a lot of athletes that it's June, they're fit, you know, they have fitness that they want to spend. And we have a lot of people who are like, well, you know, like, I'm just, you know, one of the athletes I work with is like, I've wanted to run Wildwood end to end for years. And I was like, well, here's a great time.
This is the time to do it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a big fan of that is, you know, you don't have to make it a public thing. I mean, some people
Mhm.
really thrive off that, but go pick your thing, run. If you're regional, go run Dog Mountain hard and,
Mhm.
see how hard that is. Go, yeah, do a long run on a beautiful trail like the Wilson River Trail, or run every road in your neighborhood, do
Mhm.
something like,
I like that one. Run every road in the neighborhood. That is an awesome way to actually like reconnect with where you live.
I've been doing a
uh,
little bit of that recently and found some like twisty turny, like flower covered amazing roads that I like. I'm in Northeast Portland. Like I never would have thought that they're there.
it is, I think it's like when you're like starting to burn out, like with running, that's like the thing to do
Yeah.
because it just reframes it and
Yeah.
gives you kind of enjoyment.
So Enid has some good questions too. She has two. One is, what's the bucket list race that exists for you? And what is the race that you would create if you could?
I would really like to do that World Mountain Running
That
Championship.
sounds
So that
cool.
bucket list thing, yeah. And I'm a master, so honestly, I can just go and do it. It's not like I have to qualify.
Nice.
Yeah. So, race that should exist. Okay, this is just off the top of my head. I have an 11-year-old son, and we were getting into running, and we like doing trail running stuff. And I was telling him, I'm not sure if any of these exist, so perhaps it's already out there. But in Colorado, when I was growing up, I remember reading about something called Ride and Tie. And so they did it with burros, but essentially you could pick like some trail, that went for however long. It'd be an ultra, and two people would do it with one animal, and one could ride and one would run, and you'd switch off however frequently you wanted to.
That's awesome.
And so I thought, you could do it with a horse, you could do it with a mountain bike, which I thought would be really fun to do for people now.
Yeah.
And get some buddies and just come up with a competition. But it just, to me, it's like play as a kid, and you get to like strategize. I'm gonna run 5K for my first leg and run really hard, and then ride for 10K, and we'll have my endurance buddy do 15 miles or something like that. So I think there should be some cool riding time.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
That sounds like I could see that event happening.
I would do that race, yeah.
Mountain bike race at the same way, like
Really cool.
I'm only doing it on a burro. Great.
Well, let's see. I'm gonna check and see if there are any other questions. I think that's it. Sean, as usual, these hours tear by.
Yeah.
We always try to make this happen in 45 minutes, and then looking up and it's 5:53. Thank you so much for coming on. This is such an area that I think a lot of triathletes feel like nobody's ever told them what they should be doing. And getting this kind of exposure to like, here are just the elements of run form and the elements of run technique is super duper helpful.
Yeah, this has been very important.
Yeah, I think it's a great topic to talk about. I was going to say that, I think a lot of this begs for in-person, and I think you guys will probably come up with some creative ways of doing some video things for elements of this so people can have a visual. But in the meantime, there's something that's called the BK running method, which is like these Dutch guys, and they have some videos. You can still find it. I checked this morning, but like those are actually some of the best running form videos, and there's a ton. You don't need to do them all, but if people want to kind of go deeper, I would say maybe check that out.
Awesome.
BK running form?
Yeah, it's two guys' names, but I think they call it, if you Google that in English, that'll be what comes up. Yeah.
Awesome.
When we put up the we put these videos afterwards, we put them up on YouTube. We'll put those notes down in the blah blah.
I'll send you a link. Yeah, I think you might put some samplers on YouTube too.
Great.
Nice.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me. It was really fun.
Yeah,
So
thanks for
thank you
coming.
so much for joining us.
Everyone staying safe and having fun out there.
Yeah.
And if anybody needs to buy a house, then I know the guy.
Oregon and Washington, baby. Yeah, thanks.
You can go house shopping and talk run form. I think a lot of people here are really interested in that. That sounds pretty awesome.
Run coaching, house purchasing.
Right? And if you are joining us out there today, make sure you come back again at 8 a.m. for Yoga with Amy VT tomorrow morning. Wait, no, that's Sunday. Sorry. Make sure you come back for Endurance Spin with Molly and Chris at 8 a.m. That's what we're doing tomorrow. And then Sunday is Yoga with Amy VT at 8 a.m. My brain's one day ahead.
We should really start doing that. We should...
Right, surprise!
Forcibly change the schedule on each other.
I know you're here for Sufferfest, but welcome to SwimFit. It's a great idea.
And Sean, you can come and join us for interviews anytime.
Yeah, please do.
Thank you.
It's very fun.
This is a great platform, so kudos to you guys. It's great.
All right, guys, thank you so much for watching, and here's to a happier and faster tomorrow.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thanks.